So in this tutorial, we're going to demonstrate how to light an outdoor environment. So first, let's download an outdoor environment asset from the Unity Asset Store. I've worked with this one before. It's called the RPG Polypack Light Pack. So I'll simply import it. Takes a few seconds to import, but there we are, it's now imported. And they already have a demo scene inside of the asset folder, so I'm going to just go ahead and work directly with that. You can actually see the first person perspective down here. And then let's see, if we were to zoom in on, let's say that. Now we're kind of in the center of the environment. Now the first thing you'll notice is the scene has lots of different assets inside of it, somewhat already organized, but as I've done in the past, I'm going to create an empty game node, rename it virtual environment. I'm going to delete this main camera because once I add the XR camera rig, I will have a camera. So delete that. And then I'll go ahead and move everything else underneath this virtual environment. And I've already measured this before, so I know that's to scale, so I'm not going to worry about scaling the environment. Now let's bring in the XR simulation toolkit. Actually, double clicking is probably not going to work. So let's just do that. There we go. So importing the XR simulation toolkit. And let's see, I'd like for the toolkit to appear somewhere around here. So let's see, let's go ahead and create a cube. And let's place that cube. Let's actually place that cube approximately there. And if we find that cube, can zoom in on it. And I want to make sure that about half of it is out of the ground so that we're about the appropriate height for placing the XR camera rig. And let's go ahead and place our XR camera rig. But let's make sure it's in the correct space. So the best way to do that is I'll take the visual represented cube here. I'm going to right click on the transform. I'm going to copy its component, which will basically copy these values. Note that this works because the cube is not currently a child of any other objects. Neither is the XR rig. So if I simply right click its transform and paste those component values in, my XR rig is now located at the same location as the cube. And because the cube was merely a placeholder, I'm going to go ahead and delete that. And for the purposes of this tutorial, let's go ahead and finish setting up the XR rig. So I will drop the two XRST controller scripts on each controller, drop the XRST rig on the rig, and drop the XRST shortcuts on the rig. There. So let's go ahead and test this, see how this looks. So as expected down here, I can look around the virtual environment. Currently it looks like a daytime virtual environment. You can actually see here that the sky is a custom skybox that they have imported into the scene. It's not the default Unity one. So let's actually change that skybox out first. So within the virtual environment, they have this object here called sky, and if you zoom out, you can actually see what exactly their skybox is. Now notice we have the default Unity skybox elsewhere. In general, it's best to use Unity's skybox and not some external geometry. So for now, we're actually going to disable this sky object, and you'll notice the sky has now changed in my primary view. So let's zoom back in on the XR rig. Rotate up a little bit. So the first thing I want to demonstrate here, and we don't even have to be in play mode to do this, is how directional lights work. Now by default, this virtual scene already had a directional light included with it. And the first thing that I want to demonstrate is that this directional light's position has no impact on its effects. So let's move the light around. You should notice that basically nothing happens from moving the light around, no matter where the light is. And that's because the way that a directional light works is it acts as if it's a far away light source. So therefore the position doesn't really matter. What matters is the orientation of the light. So I've changed to the rotation widget. And now if I were to rotate my light, you can see the shadows will change. And this is how we can actually simulate the passage of time. You could even write a little script that basically would control the rotation of this light. So therefore you can make it appear as if it's dawn, and then it moves all the way to dusk. Now, there is one slight anomaly with the directional light. If it starts pointing upwards, you'll notice the scene looks very weird. The reason for that is literally Unity is simulating as if the light is down here below the ground, and it's coming up through the lower meshes and trying to light what it can. Because of the ground environment, this doesn't work, obviously. So for now, I'm going to rotate the light back to some semi-conventional source. Let's actually do something more like dusk or dawn. That looks good. And actually, if you want it to simulate dusk, probably the easiest way to do that is to simply disable the directional light. So I'm going to uncheck this. And I'm also going to make sure my skybox that was included in the environment is also unchecked. And now you'll see that we have something more like a dusk skybox in the background. Though this isn't quite nighttime. So what my goal here is to actually create a nighttime fill. So in order to do that, I'm going to go ahead and import some additional skyboxes from the Unity Asset Store. So I've worked with this asset as well. Basically these 10 skyboxes here, again for free. And I will import them. Okay. So now we have these skyboxes. They're under day night, and specifically if you go to materials, we have these different materials. You can actually kind of see what they're going to look like over here. I'm actually planning to use this sky night skybox. I'm looking for a darker environment as if it's nighttime. Now, how do you go about changing your skybox? And one question is, where does the skybox come from? So we have one main camera in the scene. It's under our XR rig. And by default, its clear flags are set to the skybox, which basically means every single time the camera gets ready to render, the first thing it renders is the skybox, and then all other geometry is rendered on top of that skybox. Now, unfortunately, you can't easily change the skybox from here, but if you go to Window, and you go to Rendering, and then you go to Light Settings, you can get to the light settings for the entire Unity project. And you'll see here we have the default skybox material. So I can simply click on this. And if I find that sky night material that I wanted, you'll notice immediately the scene changes. Now there's obviously some other options here in this pack. We could do midnight, we could do a bright morning, we could do early dusk. But in particular for this demo, I'm going to work with the sky night. There's also options for changing the intensity multiplier and other aspects. Those go beyond the scope of this tutorial, so for now, we're just going to change the material to nighttime. So we have this nice nighttime environment, though. If we play this, it's going to be pretty dark for the user to walk around and to look around. It's difficult for the user to make off distant objects. However, you do get this nice bluish night sky, which looks quite interesting and has a certain aesthetic feel to it. So what I want to do right now is actually give the user a flashlight. And the way I'm going to do this is to use another type of light object that Unity provides. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to Game Object, and I'm going to go to Light, and I'm going to give the user a spotlight. So this will behave as a flashlight. And the first thing I'm going to do is make this spotlight a child of the user's right hand. And I'm going to zero out all of its transform components. So it will be at 0, 0, 0, which means it will be co-located with the right hand. And it will have no rotation, which means that it will point along the forward axis of the right hand. And in terms of the range, in general, so let's actually take a look at this. So here in the scene view, you can already see the light where it's been added. And there's two ways I can get this light to kind of cast further into the environment. So one is to affect the range. So as the range goes up, you'll see it actually goes further out into the environment and looks more like a flashlight. The other option, if I reset this, would be to change the intensity. Although the range hasn't necessarily changed, some combination of the range and intensity would quickly get there. But the problem with changing the intensity, if you'll notice, it basically bleaches out any polygons or objects that are nearby. In some cases, if you were simulating a very bright spotlight, you may want to do that. But in general, I recommend keeping your intensity 1, and I recommend changing your range to whatever value makes sense for what you're trying to achieve. So this right here is very much like the flashlight effect that I'm looking for. Because this flashlight is a child of the right hand controller, however the user moves their right hand, they basically will get the spotlight effect. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. Okay, so here we see the user, and I have control of their right hand. So let's zoom in on that. And if I basically take control of the right hand, I can actually affect where the flashlight points. Let's actually rotate around here. So I have a more intuitive control for the flashlight. So I can essentially rotate the flashlight to the right, to the left. I can rotate it up, down, all around. And this simulates basically the user using a flashlight. And as the user rotates, the flashlight will rotate with them because basically their hand's rotating with them. And again, they can basically direct this flashlight wherever they want to go. And they can also, if they move their hand around, it will also have an impact as well. Now keep in mind, if they go outside of the track space, that's problematic and that won't necessarily work. Okay, so the next thing that I want to do is I'm going to demonstrate another type of light called a point light. But in order to do that, I'm going to actually import another asset. So what I'm looking for right now is to import something that looks like a campfire. So I'm going to bring in another asset, one that I've worked with before. So there's this nice campfire pack here. Again, it's a free asset. I'm going to go ahead and import it. Great. Okay, so let's first find my new campfire. So it's going to be under this campfire pack. It's under model, model again. And here's actually the bonfire that I'm looking for. I think if you click on model, you might get a bigger view. Not necessarily in this window. Oh, here we go, down here. Maybe. There we go. So that's basically what the bonfire is going to look like. And where am I going to place this bonfire at? So let's see, currently I'm starting off looking at that house, but I want to place the bonfire somewhere over here. Now, if I remember correctly, the bonfire doesn't have a collider attached to it, and neither does the ground necessarily. So the easiest way to actually do this is to place another cube. Have our representative cube. I'm going to move it down towards the ground. I'm going to move it over to where I expect my campfire to approximately be. Cube looks like it might be a little too high. There we go. And let's actually move it a little further away from that path. Actually, let's see how it looks like over there. And that's where I'm going to place my campfire. So let's go ahead and drag the bonfire into the scene. Now the bonfire is not located where it should be. So again, I'm going to use this cube, which I placed. Again, the cube does not have a parent object. So I'll simply copy its component, transform component. The model bonfire also does not have a parent component. So I will paste these component values on top. And it is now more or less located where that cube was, so I can get rid of the cube. And let's zoom in on the bonfire, see how we're doing. Oh, we actually placed it a little bit under another object, so let's move that out. And let's see, it looks like it might be, that's probably about the right location. It's very difficult to see, so we actually need to add a light. Now within the same asset pack that the bonfire came from, there's also a model for the light under particle. It's called torch. So I'm basically going to add it to the bonfire. And initially it's in the completely wrong location, and that's because its local transform is completely off. So I'm going to simply zero this out to make it co-located with my bonfire. I'm going to set its rotation so that it's oriented the way that you would expect it to be oriented. So that looks approximately correct. I might actually want to move it up just a little bit. That looks a little bit more like a nice big fire. In fact, if I wanted to make it even bigger, I could do something like that. And then we have a really nice big fire. And the torch, if you take a look at this prefab, it already has a point light underneath it. Now again, if I want to change the range of the point light, I can either change the range itself or the intensity. Again, if you change the intensity, you're going to basically bleach out any objects that are nearby. So for this particular one, I'm just going to increase the range. As I do, you can kind of see how far the glow will go. I don't think I want to go too far. Let's pick a value, how about 80? See how that looks. That looks about right. That looks good to me. So we're going to go with a range of 80 on this point light. It's got an orangish glow to it, which kind of makes sense. It's a campfire. So let's go ahead and play this and see what it looks like. So again, I have my first person perspective down here. My user still has a flashlight. Notice they don't really need the flashlight over here because they are starting to get the light off of the point light. And now we have a nice night sky, which I controlled with the skybox. The directional light, which was originally in the environment, is basically disabled. So therefore, that's the reason it's not giving any light. If I were to re-enable this, you get a little bit of some weird effects because you have a night sky conflating with basically a sunset daylight. So we're going to turn the daylight back off. We're using a spotlight to create the flashlight effect. And there's a point light on the campfire because basically the campfire is acting like a single point or source of light. And basically light is emitting from that. And that is demonstrated basically by the spherical widget that appears when you select the point light. Very similarly, if you click on the spotlight, which we put under the right hand controller, you'll see a cone widget representing that spotlight. And that concludes this tutorial on outdoor lighting.